What if I told you that Resident Evil Requiem was my first Resident Evil game? Well, if I told you that, I'd be a fat, ugly liar, because I actually made a series of 7 videos recapping the stories of most of the Resident Evil games. Not all of them, I didn't play like Outbreak or whatever, but most of them. The supercut of those videos was actually the first video I ever had get above 1,000 views. It was amazing. But the point is to say that I love Resident Evil. It's easily my favorite survival horror franchise and probably one of my favorite video game franchises in general. So when Requiem came out, I was hyped, and I played the game, and I loved it, almost every second of it. This game is such a rewarding experience for longtime fans of the series. It's very referential to the Resident Evil 2 remake most. You can find references or nods to almost all the mainline games somewhere inside of this one. If I had to summarize how I feel about the game after 3 playthroughs now, it would be this. The first half is perfect, literally everything I ever could have wanted from a Resident Evil game, maybe even the best in the series. The second half is not. It has a lot of problems in both gameplay and writing, but I still think it's very fun and one of the better offerings from Resident Evil we've had. So a lot of this video is going to be focused on the story, like the majority of it, because even though I don't really make story recaps anymore, spending literally hundreds of hours playing, writing, and then making videos about the stories of Resident Evil games leaves you a permanently changed man.
7 minutes.
But I'll start by talking about the gameplay and the characters and all that boring stuff. Just keep in mind that this video will have spoilers from basically start to finish, so if you haven't played this game yet and plan to, don't watch the video. Instead, go watch my video on Juice Galaxy. I'm sure a Resident Evil fan would love that one. The size of enemies in this game depends on their level. They can get huge in later areas. Polywogs seem to be pretty low on the food chain to me, especially compared to some of the creatures we're about to meet. Anyway, yeah, spoilers ahead. So first of all, this game absolutely kills it with the main characters, which is something most Resident Evil games do, I feel. Leon is Leon, he's always going to be an amazing main character, but I think they did so insanely good with Grace. So this game offers you the choice between first and third person for both Leon and Grace, recommending that you do first person for Grace and third person for Leon. I think that's generally the way to go. I think third person Grace is objectively a worse experience, but first person Leon is kind of fun. It makes you feel like you're playing Call of Duty, or like when the guards attack you, I literally had to play Rainbow Six and like hold angles and shit. Super fun. The only downside is that you'll still get put into third person anytime you do an execution as Leon, so I would just go with third to start. For Grace though, her playstyle just doesn't really favor third person, I think. Far and away the coolest part about this game is that Grace's sections play like RE7 and 8, while Leon's play like the remakes of 2, 3, and 4. I truly cannot believe how well they pulled this off. Like, Grace even has the inventory management system of 7, while Leon has the management of 4. It's so good. But anyway, RE7 in particular, RE8 was way more of an action game, RE7 in particular was very slow. Like, I think you probably fight maybe less than 30 enemies in that entire game, which is how Grace's sections are. You only ever get 2 guns as her, a pistol and then Requiem for part of the game, which has limited ammo. Of course she has other weapons like the injectors or the acid vials, but those are very much drip fed to you, just like ammo is as her. At least on your first playthrough that's true. I was drowning in ammo on my other 2, but that's every Resident Evil game. Anyway, the main reason you should play first person as Grace is because she is very small, like minuscule. Like, Grace cannot be taller than 5'4", and this is like the perfect height for a survival horror protagonist because it's still a realistic height. Like, you don't feel like you're playing as a little kid, but you're also still shorter than almost everyone else you meet. When you're in third person, you don't really feel that, but in first, you genuinely feel the size difference between you and most of these enemies. That's not the only reason I like Grace. I think her personality also just works really well in this setting. Grace is so unbelievably not cut out for this shit, but she still has to try. She's very socially awkward, like she avoids eye contact whenever she meets somebody new constantly, and is stuttering constantly anytime she has to ask something slightly challenging.
No.
That's your kid?
What?
This?
She tries to act tough sometimes and tries to intimidate people like the helicopter guy or Zeno, but she just does not have that dog in her like that. Ethan was also kind of like that in RE7, but he didn't really interact with people in the same way that Grace does in this game. Ethan was mainly a player stand-in RE7, and then in RE8 he's very much built for this now. I like Ethan, by the way. I think his storyline is a really good example of how far people will go to save the ones they love, even if for most people that doesn't mean fighting mold monsters and giant vampire ladies. But back to Grace. Her awkwardness and how unsure she acts in this situation is so real. Like, while playing this game, I kind of felt like that clip from Gravity Falls where he's like, "It's just like my life," in a way. Because while I'm not a 5'6" mid-20s woman, I am a 6'2" mid-20s man, I would also be a bumbling fool if I had to face down either of the villains of this game. If you do play as Grace in third person though, you get to see her tripping while being chased by the monster in one of the first sections too, which is also very real and exactly what would have happened to me. For reference, one time when I was in 8th grade, I got really high with my boy, and then because we were 13, we had to hide it, so we put on sunglasses and then went out at like 8 p.m, so it was dark out. As we were walking, this couple had a pit bull off leash and he started running towards us, so I tried to run only to immediately trip and fall onto the rocks next. Luckily, the pit bull just wanted to play, so it just ran a circle around us, then left. But yeah, if I was in this game, I would have fallen and gotten eaten by the girl in the first section. I will continue to gush over how good Grace and Leon are throughout the entire video, so let's move on for now. Speaking of the girl, the monster design in the first half of this game is so fucking good, because they do one specific thing that just works so well for me. They put uncomfortably large creatures in uncomfortably small places. So like, look at the girl for example. Even hunched over, she's scraping the ceiling. Like, she's got to be at least 15 feet tall. An even better example is the fat zombie from Grace's section. This thing is so big that it literally has to squeeze itself through the hallway to keep moving. It's so unnerving to watch these things move in the spaces they inhabit in-game. The second half doesn't really keep this energy. In terms of monsters, it kind of becomes a best of Resident Evil towards the end, but the beginning was really good. I think the girl might be the scariest Resident Evil monster to me. Like, when I'm running from her and I reach a room with light, which she can't stand, there's a genuine feeling in my gut that if she really wanted to, she could reach far enough in and drag me out. She also really looks like that one scene in The Taking of Deborah Logan, which is like an all-timer horror scene for me purely for the visuals. Now, I guess the competition isn't really that tough when it comes to actually scary Resident Evil monsters. There's a lot of very tense encounters, like almost any tyrant, like Mr. X and Nemesis. But like, really the only scary ones would be the mom from Resident Evil 7 and then the baby from 8. Anyway, the fat zombie is also a really good monster design. RE6 also had a fat zombie, called the Whopper actually, and then there was a bigger version called Whopper Supreme. So you can clearly tell they were kind of a joke enemy, but they were at least somewhat realistically fat. These ones in this game are not. They are grotesque, and watching them squeeze and tumble their way around the environment is really off-putting. You also have to get uncomfortably close to them sometimes. Like, if you want to kill Grace's, you have to inject him with a hemolytic, then Leon's whole fight is just being way too close with this thing. The zombies, I could give or take. It's kind of cool that they have some memories left from being human, but like, eh. Now what is crazy is that Leon zombies actually use weapons, which gets crazy in the second half of the game. You got these motherfuckers who can throw a rebar pole cross-country at you, gun zombies, and even mortar zombies at a certain point. The culmination of all of this, what you were training for, is having to fight dudes with guns that do realistic amounts of damage. Now right off the bat, let me say this. This part of the game is where it skirts a little too close to RE6 and RE5 territory for me. Now let me be clear, I like both of those games, but RE5 kind of starts sucking when the enemies are just guys with guns, and that's like half of the enemies in RE6. RE6 does it better just by virtue of not having that shit-ass aiming system, but after playing through that game twice in a row for my video, I really don't plan on ever opening it up again. Now Requiem has the distinct advantage over those two games of having actual good action gameplay, so the only part I'd consider kinda bad is the actual gunfight with the security guards. I said earlier that this game had been preparing you for that moment, but it really didn't. These guys will clap you so insanely fast, which is cool and realistic, but not fun at all. Then you get to the liquors part, and Grace's section is kind of fun, but I think the liquors are kind of mid when thrown at you in this quantity. I think their best performance is in the remake of 2, because when they appear in 5 in this game, there's just way too many of them. I think liquors should be kind of an oh shit moment rather than a common enemy you see thrown at you. Now when it comes to boss fights, this game does pretty good. Grace doesn't really have any boss fights because she's very underpowered compared to Leon, but Leon's are pretty fun. I'll be honest, I'm not sure there's ever been a great Resident Evil boss in the history of the franchise. I mean, Wesker's first stage is probably the best, but the second stage sucks. And bro, don't even get me started on the Veronica fight in Code Veronica. Holy fuck, but I think this game has actually decent fights. My favorite is probably Mr. X, and my least favorite is the plant. Mr. X is really cool and satisfying. The ability to parry in this game is huge in the enjoyment of the boss fights for sure. And that's honestly why the plant sucks. You can't parry it, you just have to run around to dodge its attacks, which to be clear, is how almost all Resident Evil games are. The Hunk fight is definitely cool too, but I don't think it's quite as good as the Krauser knife fight in RE4. This game's weapon variety is pretty decent. I actually had the thought halfway through that there wasn't going to be a merchant this time, only for there to be a merchant. Now when it comes to merchants in this game, they never even try to make them make any story sense. Like the RE4 merchant is clearly a Ganado and yet he just sells you all this shit, and the Duke in RE8 is genuinely a magical entity. But the merchant in this game also makes no sense. The BSAA just threw these infinite loot boxes around where you can spend your credits you earn from killing monsters on new weapons. Now let's be clear here. That part about earning points for killing monsters is not out of the question. I feel like we're probably headed in that direction in real life, but the infinite loot box is a little funny to me. This is not a complaint, by the way. That would be like complaining about the item box, like it's just a gameplay thing. To its credit, all of the above merchants make more sense than the RE5 system, where Chris and Sheva just mysteriously gain access to an arsenal in between each mission, even when they're like on a boat heading down a river or something. The weapons are good, but there's nowhere near as much variety as there was in RE8 or the remake of 4. I mean, there is variety, but you have to unlock it with challenge points. But to be honest, the time you spend with access to the merchant in your first playthrough is so limited that I don't think they needed too much variety right off the bat. Insanity mode in this game is so insane, by the way. I tried to look up like strategy guides and all people were saying was, unlock infinite ammo, then it's not so bad. Like, alright buddy. I literally couldn't make it past the first combat section without being like, yeah, you know what? I need to unlock infinite ammo too. Alright, so, the story. I'm going to talk about events in sequential order, but I won't be recapping the story. I'm going to talk about things as they happen, and then reference later events, if that makes sense. So as I've already mentioned, if you have not played this game and don't want to be spoiled even more, hop off the video, bro. This is also going to be very disjointed. I have a lot of thoughts here, and I was really excited to talk about this game. Before we get into it, I'll say this. I think, like the gameplay, the first half of the story of this game is near perfect. Like, the entire section in the hospital is amazing. The second half, though, is like fan service central, man, which as a huge Resident Evil fan, had me giggling and laughing like a kid on an amusement park ride, but it has some huge problems and I think they go a little far with the fan service at times. Anyway, at first I thought the FBI's decision to send this bookish analyst, Grace Ashcroft, to investigate a creepy hotel by herself was like a setup. It totally seemed like her boss was in on the plan and wanted her to get captured by Victor Gideon. But on my second playthrough I realized that what happened was more on the local police than the FBI. The FBI probably assumed that the police had the crime scene locked down, not just one dude standing outside, and even if it was one dude, I'm sure they, and Grace, assumed the cop would have gone in with her. Now when it comes to Victor Gideon, I think he had the potential to be an all-timer Resident Evil villain. He looks really sick, he acts super creepy, and he's intimidating. Like anytime a character shares a scene with him, you have that thought in your head that he actually might kill somebody important. That being said, what keeps him from actually being an all-timer villain to me, or even being close, is that after the beginning of the game, he has almost no presence in the story. But anyway, I do like Gideon. That being said though, this guy is not too smart. So the Connections need Grace alive to accomplish their plan. They believe that she is the key to unlocking Oswald Spencer, the founder of Umbrella's greatest bioweapon yet, called Elpis, a mind control virus. Imagine what they could do with that. But like I said, they believe 110% that they need Grace alive to get the virus. You would not think that's the case given how fucking Victor treats this girl. Right off the bat in the hotel he sends the zombie cop at her, which easily could have, and almost did, get her killed. Then when he kidnaps her he throws her on a gurney in the hospital, which is fine, except the girl is currently at large in the exact same area that he just stored their key to world domination in. Literally the only thing between Grace and getting her head chomped off by that monster is one single light, which we see get knocked out by lightning like 5 minutes later. Now you could say that Gideon was keeping an eye on her through the cameras, and I do think he probably could have dealt with the girl if he needed to, but still this is a huge risk to take with your golden goose even without her escaping. Now we do see that when the girl was about to kill Grace, Victor was lurking in the background, But like, you cut it a little close there, buddy. And how long were you going to let Grace get beat up before stepping in? Like I said earlier though, the girl is an amazing Resident Evil monster. So fucking creepy, man. Anyway, backing up a little bit to Leon's introduction, I definitely nutted a little when he showed up on screen, and I was pretty much geeking throughout the entire playthrough every time he said a one-liner or did anything slightly cool. I think this first scene with Leon and Gideon is so good at establishing Gideon as a villain.
Is she okay?
Oh, she's fine. I'm just taking her home.
Like, he literally just pops like 20 people with a zombie virus in the middle of a crowded city for no other reason than to stall Leon from catching him. Like, he almost caused another Raccoon City here. Luckily, Leon's been through this exact situation like 3 times now, once in RE2 and then twice in RE6, so there's no hesitation as he just fucking obliterates these zombies. I actually love the characterization of Leon in this game so much because that man truly has been through so much worse than what the villains of Requiem can throw at him. RE4 was insane enough with the Ganados, him being literally infected with the parasite, and then having to fight multiple giant monsters. But then you look at RE6 where this man saw hundreds of civilians die in front of him, nearly died in a ballistic missile strike filled with zombie gas, and then had to fight this fucking thing. Like, yeah, a big gray dude and some zombies won't faze Leon after all that.
I don't remember getting an invitation.
Well, he's waiting for you.
Can't have that, can we?
Same thing when he arrives at the asylum, like the nurse is trying to sell him on the place and their treatments, but Leon sees through the bullshit immediately.
Experimental therapies.
Yes. It's all very cutting edge. The facility keeps a low profile due to the sensitive nature of the research.
Oh, I bet it does.
So good, man. I've seen some people kind of laughing at how he let that nurse get clapped just to get off a one-liner, which is definitely true, but I doubt Leon could have saved her anyway. By the way, I'm not exactly sure when the DSO, or Division of Security Operations, started being a thing. Maybe they were mentioned in previous games, but I don't remember it if they were. Anyway, I think it makes a lot of sense for Leon to no longer be a Secret Service agent though, because in RE6 he did let the president get killed on his watch. Another kind of stupid side note here, but I think it's interesting that we've come full circle with the BSAA, which if you don't know is the main bioterrorism agency in the world, but the plot of Resident Evil Revelations has the UN-backed BSAA expose the USA's FBC for staging terrorist attacks to increase their funding, which as I said in that video is a totally outlandish idea that the government would never do in real life, but the BSAA ended up exposing the FBC and taking over their resources, only to then be the most incompetent agency in the world, which is why the US now has the DSO to fight bioterror. At the end of RE8, we saw that the BSAA had been using bioweapons, specifically zombie soldiers, but we haven't seen that plotline expanded on yet and won't in this game, so whatever. Anyway, Leon no-diffs the girl with Requiem, which I love that they sent him in with. It just shows that the DSO is at least competent. Compare that to when the Secret Service sent him in to save the president's daughter with a 9mm in a dream. But Leon and Grace get separated and the best part of the game begins. This whole section as Grace is just peak survival horror, and anytime you get a Leon interjection, it really saves the game from getting too boring. Also, this place has all the same weird puzzles you'd expect of a Resident Evil game, and it's a hospital located right by Raccoon City. So I wouldn't be surprised if George Trevor, the guy who built the Spencer Mansion and the RPD from the first 2 games, didn't also build this hospital.
Weird. How do people normally get in here?
When the first trailer for this game came out, people thought that the girl was actually Lysa Trevor, who Umbrella injected with the progenitor virus, the same one that Wesker had, although it was less stable, and turned her into a weird invincible monster. So it was not at all out of the question that Lysa Trevor survived, especially because the way she quote-unquote died was by getting trapped under a chandelier by Wesker as the mansion exploded. Anyway, Grace and Emily's storyline is very compelling, I think. I think most people had one of 2 reactions when walking into Emily's jail room for the first time. Either you thought she's definitely some kind of monster in disguise, or you thought, I'm gonna get you out of there. I definitely fell into that first camp until you actually do free her from the cell, and it turns out she really is just a nice kid who's been in a cell her entire life, so she's kind of poorly socialized. Which, speaking of poorly socialized, not to glaze Grace any harder as a survival horror protagonist, but her being so unsure and awkward when talking to new people is really compelling. Like all of her interactions with Emily, where she's so awkward, you can tell she's never really interacted with kids as an adult before. It's really endearing, which I think it's good. They make Grace so endearing because if they didn't, a decision she makes later probably would have made her pretty widely disliked. But Grace is great, Emily is great, and when the girl kidnaps Emily, I was like, bring it on, motherfucker, nobody messes with Emily. Grace is also a lot smarter than the average horror protagonist, like for example, how she avoids Victor in this scene.
Would you like to see what's hidden under the hood?
Grace! Wait! Grace!
I can guarantee you I would not have been able to think of that so fast in the moment. Also, when she does unlock Emily's cell, she makes sure to ask why she's in there in the first place. You know, to verify that Emily won't turn into a giant monster when exposed to air, which kinda happens later. Also, the girl was the person in the other cell, which is now empty, so Grace being careful here is definitely the right move. Back to Leon for a minute. This scene with him and Victor where Victor like sensually strokes his hair and whispers in his ear is another reason why he could have been such a good villain. What the fuck? Like, it's just so creepy, even though some of us might do the same thing if we had Leon in that situation. At the end of Leon's third chapter, we learn that his Overwatch, or his girl in the chair or whatever, is Sherry Birkin, who he of course saved during the events of RE2, although that one was a little more unclear, I think. Anyway, we learn that both she and Leon have what they're calling Raccoon City Syndrome. The setup for this game and the reason why Grace was sent to the hotel in the first place is because strange bodies keep showing up with dark bruising and sudden death, all of whom were Raccoon City survivors. We learn that Sherry and Leon both have this, which means that they're going to die very soon. This is a really great plot point for Leon in particular. It gives him this whole, I'll finish the mission if it's the last thing I do attitude, and he has some great lines later on related to that. With that being said, I think this syndrome brings up a lot of questions. First of all, I'm surprised Sherry even has it. We learned in RE6 that because of her being infected, then cured with the G virus, she has the antibodies required to cure the C virus, which was a modified T virus. Now, if you read the files in this game, you see that everybody who has Raccoon City Syndrome does have the T virus antibodies. However, the virus was dormant in their body and is now waking up, which is a real thing viruses can do. So you could say that Sherry's antibodies can't help her because the T virus has mutated, so her antibodies don't work anymore, which I would accept as an answer because I don't really care too much about that point. What I care way more about is the fact that if everybody who's in Raccoon City has this syndrome, a whole lot of fucking characters are going through it right now. At the bare minimum, Claire, Jill, Carlos, and Ada would have it, but if we assume that it's just general exposure to the T-virus strain from Raccoon City, that means Chris, Rebecca, Billy, Barry, Wesker if he was still alive, and probably Hunk would all have Raccoon City Syndrome. In fact, we actually know from this game that Hunk does have it, so it's not unreasonable to assume that everybody else I just mentioned does too. Now when it comes to Carlos, Rebecca, and Billy, none of them ever appeared again after their game, so we really don't need to worry about them. Similar thing with Barry. I mean, he was in Revelations 2, but that guy's old as hell anyway, so we can write him off. But Chris, Claire, Jill, and Ada are literally the main characters of the series. If they're all currently dying from this syndrome, you'd think we'd at least hear about it. I also would have loved an Ada appearance in this game, but you can't ask for too much, you know? But yeah, while this is a great plot point for Leon and Sherry, it introduces so many questions about so many characters that this game doesn't answer, nor should it need to answer those. Like, as much as we would all love it, you don't need to give us an update on what all 46 Resident Evil protagonists are up to currently, except you kinda do when we can assume that they're actively dying at the same time. Anyway, T-virus zombies in this first level have this thing where they kind of remember what they were doing before death. Like the chef keeps cooking, the maids keep cleaning, and the singers keep singing. I think this is cool, but what I don't like is that there's two zombies with most of the personality types. Like, the two singers make sense, but like the two light switchers and the two maids just feel like they ran out of ideas pretty quickly on personalities that they could give these zombies. The most disappointing for me was when I realized there were actually two of the fat zombies. Just like with the girl, I think these enemies are so intimidating because of just how fucking large they are and how small the spaces they squeeze themselves into is. However, it's a little stupid to say, oh yeah, these two brothers had the exact same reaction to the T-virus. What? That's crazy. I would have rather Leon fight something new in the attic, or Grace killing the fat zombie means that Leon doesn't have to fight it, not two fat zombies. Blister heads are cool enemies too. They remind me a lot of Crimson heads from the RE1 remake, which was definitely intentional. As for this strain of T-Virus, I think it's cool how it retains a little more of their intelligence. Like, we see zombies in Leon's chapters using weapons, but then later you see the Raccoon City zombies also doing that, which is not behavior we've ever seen in T-Virus zombies before. Maybe they also mutated to gain slightly more intelligence. I mean, we see the fucking BSAA zombies using guns and manning mortars, so that must be the case, but whatever. After Grace's second interaction with Victor, he kind of fucks off for the entire chapter. I mean, we see him one more time towards the end, but that's pretty much it.
I've done it. I've done it.
I think that sucks, and it contributes even more to the idea that this guy is really stupid. Because again, at any point while Victor was down in the lab, Grace could have died, which would have completely ruined their plan and probably resulted in Victor being killed. I think this might just be a character flaw for Victor. Maybe he just loves men too much to ever care for a woman, I don't know. Later on, Zeno, who I'll talk a lot more about, takes a way more active role in protecting Grace, so I can imagine if he was here during this part of the game, he would have been shitting his pants. Although he kinda also has a Victor moment later, where he just stands around waiting for Grace to come back rather than going and looking for her. Whatever. I love the basement section with the girl. I actually love the basement in general. It's a huge vibe shift from the hospital, which while covered in blood and dead bodies was still pretty nice to look at. This place is grimy and dark, and you find a literal conveyor belt of dead bodies all feeding into a massive processing pool where they collect the blood of people infected with the virus. Where do they get these people from? Who knows, but since they are a medical institution, maybe they just buy a ton of cadavers and organ donors, throw the T-Virus into them, which does work on dead bodies, and then harvest their blood. Now, what is the point of the blood? Well, we don't ever get told exactly, but we find some notes that say that Oswald Spencer believed that memories could be transferred from one person to another via blood, so I think that's what Victor was trying to do here. Specifically, he was probably trying to figure out how to extract the secret of Elpin from the blood of Emily, who we learn later is actually a clone of Grace. So he'd be operating under the assumption that Oswald Spencer hid the secret to Elpin inside the blood of Grace, which would also be inside the blood of one of her clones. It's honestly not a bad idea given the knowledge that he and the connections had to go off of, but it's kind of funny later on when we learn just how much of a massive waste of time and money it all was. Anyway, the final confrontation with the girl is really good, and I love that Grace actually got to kill her rather than having to get saved by Leon or Victor or something. Emily's death was super sad, and the best thing they accomplish here is having made you so attached to Grace that you don't immediately hate her for throwing the gun back at Leon and giving herself up to Victor and Zeno. Like, we know that it's not the right choice to make, we know that Leon had to shoot Emily, otherwise she would have killed them, but we understand why Grace feels the way she does. I'm gonna hold off on the Zeno rant for a little bit to talk about the spider. Leon going back to Raccoon City is a great plot point. His whole life was upended by this place, and probably ruined by what Umbrella did to that fucking city. Leon just wanted to be a cop, right? He just wanted to give people tickets, use unnecessary force, and maybe date Chris's sister on the side. Because of Umbrella, he ended up literally being forced by the US government to fight bioweapons for his entire life, although he did probably still get to date Chris's sister though, so that's a plus. That's a plot point that I feel like a lot of people don't know. We see in Dark Side Chronicles, which was one of the on-rails shooter games, that Leon was either becoming a BOW fighting weapon or going to prison, so Umbrella and Raccoon literally ruined his life, or at the very least, changed the entire course of his life against his will. So even though it's very fanservice-y, I love that Leon gets to come back and diff all of the monsters that gave him so much trouble back when he was like 20. Up first is the spider, which is one of the greatest representations of the Raccoon City incident. Umbrella fucking loved their T-Virus insects for whatever reason. You had cockroaches, spiders, a centipede, and of course if anything could survive the nuke, it would be the insects. Anyway, the spider fight itself is kinda mid, but I do think it was a fun callback. Alright, now it's time to talk about Zeno. Look at this guy and tell me what you see.
I've been waiting for you, Grace.
Oh no, man.
Who are you?
Raccoon City.
Cannot be fucking Wesker. That's fucking Wesker. Very obviously Wesker. He looks like Wesker, talks like Wesker, has the same powers as Wesker. Oh, it is Wesker. It
What
is. Fucking Wesker,
Mr.
I knew it.
I had a feeling you'd make an appearance.
Fucking knew it.
Sorry.
Like, that's very obviously just Albert Wesker. Except he's not. That's Zeno. And nobody in this game seems to think he looks anything like Wesker. Now you could say, well, Leon and Sherry never met Wesker, and you'd be right. Wesker was always Chris's villain. Just like how Raccoon City ruined Leon's life, Wesker ruined Chris's. That being said, we know, verifiably, that Sherry at the least knows who Wesker is, and it's very likely that Leon would too. So how can I say that we know that Sherry would know? Well, Sherry's partner in RE6, which was a co-op game that you could optionally play single player, was a guy named Jake. Jake Wesker, except he didn't know that. You get the sense that Jake was like a mistake Wesker made in his younger years, because having kids with a random Eastern European woman definitely doesn't contribute to the whole eugenics plan he was trying to enact. But anyway, when Jake learns that his dad was Albert Wesker, his reaction is,
monster. You never thought dear old dad was just a deadbeat who skipped out on us. No, he was actually a freaking nut job who almost destroyed the world.
which means that this random mercenary knew about Albert Wesker and what he did. Sherry also knew who Wesker was because she bonds with Jake over them both having terrible fathers. So when Leon sends her a video of Zeno, her reaction should be, holy fuck, is that Wesker? She also scans the database for any sign of this guy, which you'd think, just based off facial recognition, the US government's database would go, holy fuck, that's Wesker. Except nobody ever mentions it. I literally was gaslit my first playthrough into thinking that he had nothing to do with Wesker because of how nobody mentions anything.
And you are nothing but an imitation.
But it's very clear on my second playthrough that Zeno is a clone, or at least somebody who's had like a Wesker transplant or something. Cloning is a decently big part of the story, so clearly you're supposed to walk away with the idea that Zeno is a clone of Wesker. Except, like I said, the characters in the game who should absolutely call out this fact never do. It's really stupid. I don't like the term plot hole, but this is literally a hole in the plot. The only way you can explain it is by saying something stupid like, well sure, Leon and Sherry know who Wesker is, but they don't know what he looks like, which is stupid because then the database still would have recognized him. I will say this much though, I'm very glad that Zeno wasn't literally Wesker come back from the dead, as that plot point really would have sucked. I think the key to a good villain is knowing when to let them go. Wesker was fundamentally Chris's villain. Like, he killed all of Chris's friends, kidnapped his sister, then mind-controlled his crush, also weirdly dyeing her hair blonde. You know Chris's blood was boiling every time he saw that blonde-haired motherfucker, which is why it was so satisfying when he finally killed him at the end of RE5. Now, we've never seen a Wesker clone before in the series, but we obviously did have his son in RE6, and we actually had his sister, kinda, in Revelations 2. The villain of that game is Alex Wesker. So basically, Albert Wesker was part of a program run by Oswald Spencer to find the best and brightest young blue-eyed Aryan children and raise them up. Alex Wesker was another one of those kids, so not directly related to Wesker by blood, but cut from the same cloth as him. Zeno seems to be an actual genetic clone of Wesker, although it doesn't seem like he knows that. If Zeno actually was Wesker, I don't think he would have bothered with a fake name. He probably would have just been like, Wesker's back and we're doing the Ouroboros eugenics program again. Which, by the way, was like one wrong move from Chris away from succeeding. So I think with the state the current BSAA is in, if Wesker actually did come back, he would win this time. But anyway, I'm getting off track. Zeno is Wesker, but he's also not. I don't think Wesker clones are a bad plot point, I just think the execution here was horrible. Basically gaslighting the player and saying, no, that's not Wesker, that's Zeno, for 4 hours. Anyway, the section with the BSAA zombies and the mortars, as I've already mentioned, is like straight out of RE5. Which I don't hate RE5, but I don't think it's a great territory to be in. The BSAA get rocked so hard here, which is very accurate to how they performed in every other game they appear in, aside from maybe RE8. But even then, without the presence of Chris or Jill, the BSAA is so fucking horrible at their jobs. Like in RE6, when there's a battleship off the coastline that contains zombie gas missiles, the only person trying to deal with that is Chris and Piers in a jet that they stole from the people with the zombie gas. So all of this is to say that if you're confused at how much the BSAA gets fucked up in this game, this is a pretty average performance for them. Speaking of RE5, the motorcycle section is like straight out of that game or RE6, or just like games in general from that time period. I actually thought it was really fun, and the mutated wolves are really cool. I wish we could have seen more of them. Anyway, revisiting RPD is great, although this section has easily the worst part of the game, and probably any Resident Evil game released since 7. The section where you play as one of the Grace clones is so stupid and boring. Now, maybe you find bald children scary, but I don't, so this section is literally hiding from kids for minutes at a time, playing as a character who you already know dies because Zeno said she did. It really sucks. The Grace clones are kind of a weird plot point anyway. All we know about why Umbrella was making them is that they wanted to be able to experiment on kids without actually kidnapping a bunch of kids, which makes sense. The reason why Victor and the Connections are making them too is just because they think that they have something to do with Elpis, which as we learn later on, is not true at all. It's kind of darkly funny that Zeno's like, such a wasted sacrifice, but he doesn't know the half of just how wasted it was. They also introduced this retcon here where it wasn't actually the president who ordered the strike on Raccoon City, but actually the deep state trying to destroy Elpin so nobody else could have it. I don't know how to feel about this, because on one hand I appreciate the RE6 call out when he says,
They couldn't let it be stolen, so they launched the missile strike to hide it.
To hide a virus. Why do something so extreme?
Extreme? Is it? When the president tried to investigate, they had him assassinated.
in RE6, the reason you're given is that the president was trying to be forthcoming with the US government's involvement in the Raccoon City incident, which is why he was killed, and this doesn't contradict that, it just kind of adds to it. On the other hand, I don't know, it feels a little too Metal Gear Solid-y for me. In those games, there is not a single plot point that doesn't go through a retcon or two, and it feels like we might be getting to that point here. Anyway, once you finish that fuck-ass section, Zeno calls down a Mr. X tyrant on Leon.
Sorry, but I don't have time to spare. Have fun.
Man, you gotta be fucking kidding me.
Or like T-102 or whatever they're called. And let me be clear, this is pure fan service, but I'm still down with this. This moment is so sick because on the grand scale of everything Leon's fought in his life, tyrants are pretty low on that scale. So you get to beat the fuck out of Mr. X, killing him without a convenient rocket launcher this time, and it's great. The next section is where they lose me with the fan service. You fight a Plant 43, which you don't even do in RE2, that was an RE1 enemy. Like, this callback was just so pointless for me. It's a decent fight, but I don't think anybody loved Plant 43 that much anyway. You then arrive at ARC, an Umbrella facility that has been reclaimed by the Connections, and is now the biggest BOW factory in the world. They're actually making some interesting stuff here, like tyrants and boiled down nemesises, as well as the wolf things and liquors. Now, in my RE5 video, when the liquors showed up in that game, I was like, I don't understand what Tricell sees in these things, and I still feel that way. Liquors are really kind of a shitty bioweapon, I think. Now, obviously they're really deadly, but they're also impossible to control, so you basically can only use them in terroristic situations. I actually think hunters are better than liquors. We see in Revelations that just deploying a shitload of hunters into a city was able to destroy the entire city. They're also definitely cheaper than liquors are, as liquors mutate from normal zombies when they eat enough biomass, whereas hunters are just genetically modified from the embryo. But I guess the Connections doesn't see the vision, so we're stuck with liquors. They also produce the plant outside and are kind of like, welp, this is a good reminder as to properly contain your BOWs. Like, that thing has to be impeding their operations. They could definitely kill it if they wanted to, but I guess it also keeps out intruders, so... Anyway, by the time Leon gets there, it seems like the Connections have evacuated the place, probably on Zeno's orders. Not far in, you have to fight the security guards, and while I've already said I don't like this moment from a gameplay perspective, I think finally getting to kill Umbrella Security Service, or at least the modern analog to them, is really based. Leon vs. Hunk is also a fight we all wanted to see, and it's a really cool fight. I agree with the game's assessment that Leon would mid-diff Hunk like this. I think the advantage that Hunk has is probably that he has more experience fighting humans than Leon does, but also not really because the Ganados were near human in their intelligence. And to be honest, I'm not sure the Hunk could have even beaten Krauser like Leon did. So anyway, very fanservice-y, but I still love Leon vs. Hunk. We then find out that the holdup for getting Elpin is a simple password entry, but one single wrong entry destroys Elpin forever. So this helps you understand why the Connections would go to the lengths of starting a massive blood operation underneath a mental hospital and creating tens to hundreds of child clones to try to find the answer, rather than just hiring like some hackers or something. Leon and Grace have some cute moments after this, but let's fast forward to Grace finding the truth of Elpin. So we get to see a video of Oswald Spencer in his last couple years. Remember that this bloke didn't die peacefully of old age, he was actually killed by Wesker for basically no other reason than Wesker didn't like him. Anyway, this tape shows us that Spencer regretted the impact he had on the world, which was killing millions and throwing the world into decades of bioterrorism. In the moment, I actually called it Oswald Spencer revisionism. The Oswald Spencer revisionism is crazy. But I actually think it makes sense. What Spencer wanted was just some good old eugenics. He wanted to use the progenitor virus to allow the genetically worthy of the human race to ascend to demigodhood while everyone else died out. You know, survival of the fittest and all that, and in this case that means being part of like the 0.5% with the right genetic makeup to survive infection with the virus. The various viruses and shit were really just attempts to stabilize Progenitor, but he ended up being able to sell the monsters that it created to fuel his research even further. But Spencer never accomplished his dream, and now he realizes that he basically permanently ruined the world for his eugenics dream, and he regrets it. Grace has this almost mental breakdown thinking about the fact that she was a clone earlier, which Spencer says she isn't, but I think he's lying. I think it's pretty clear that Grace is one of the clone babies that Spencer just kind of plucked off the assembly line and decided to give a better life to. There's no secret password hidden in her DNA, nor was there in any of the hundreds of children the Connections killed. Grace is literally just a kid that Spencer wanted to give a better life to. So with Leon on death's door, Grace and him confront Zeno, with Grace saying she'll enter the password if Zeno agrees to spare Leon. Kind of a stupid deal because Leon is about to die anyway, but whatever. You actually get a choice here, to destroy Open or trust that Spencer did the right thing and unlock it.
Oh shit. Oh man. Ooh, give me a choice. Oh, I mean. Oh, dude, I don't know. I feel like releasing it is the right move.
If you destroy it, there's no final boss or anything. You watch Leon get executed by Zeno and then Grace escapes, so that ending isn't canon. But if you choose to release it, you find that Elpin is actually an antiviral agent. Specifically, I would guess an antiviral for anything derived from Progenitor, which is basically every virus in this game. I mean, even the mold in RE7 is related to Progenitor. Zeno unknowingly injects himself with it, gets cured of his powers, and then Victor comes back. And what he says here just makes me even more frustrated that he didn't get more screen time.
Amazing. I am humbled by my master's genius.
Your research was wrong. Elpis wasn't a weapon. There was never a key.
Spencer's paper was obviously incomplete. There was no connection between Grace and Emily.
Do you know how much time and money I wasted on this?
Don't you see the genius? With Elpis, all virus-based weapons are useless. The world order would be thrown into chaos.
By the way, Victor is an ex-Umbrella scientist who fucking loved Oswald Spencer. Anyway, Vic is like, wow, Spencer was so genius, I'll make sure to carry on his legacy and use Elpin the way he intended. I just love the contrast between Zeno's outrage at how much time and money they wasted on what ended up being the literal opposite of what the Connections wanted, and Victor being like, I love Oswald Spencer! I also love how he just offs Zeno with a flick of the tentacle. Of course that only happened because Zeno no longer had his powers. I actually don't know who would win in an actual fight. If you play the game Umbrella Chronicles, you get to play as Wesker, and he kind of struggles with normal tyrants, so I don't know. Now what Victor would have done with Elpin, who knows, but Grace uses it to cure Leon and we get the final boss fight. As it turns out, and I think this is super disappointing, Victor has a Nemesis parasite. He turns into a massive meat flower like Nemesis did at the end of the RE3 remake, and I think it's lame. I would have much rather seen him turn into one of the weird new T-Virus monsters we see in this game, rather than just another callback. Nemesis wasn't even Leon's thing anyway, but whatever. The final boss fight is decent, and then we see the BSAA arrive after the final boss has been beaten, which is exactly what they did in RE7. Now, to their credit, they did actually arrive on time in RE8, but that's the exception, not the rule. Remember that the world was literally one boulder punch away from ending and the BSAA couldn't be bothered to send reinforcements in RE5. Anyway, the ending heavily implies that either Chris will be the main character of the next game, which would be based as fuck, or he'll appear in the DLCs. If the DLC thing comes true, then we'll likely see how he was trying to deal with Raccoon City Syndrome on his end. Hopefully anyway. The post-credits scene then shows the BSAA getting killed once again and the Connections making off with something. Definitely not Elpin though. We actually don't know what they grabbed. Some people think it was Zeno's body so they can then make more Wesker clones, but we don't know. Also, it turns out Emily isn't actually dead and Grace gets to cure her and then raise her, which is very heartwarming. I love Grace, but if she comes back as a protagonist, you know damn well it's going to be because someone kidnapped Emily. Then we kind of just did the whole Ethan plotline all over again. So I kind of hope that doesn't happen. But that was a very rambly discussion of the story. I think it has some really high points. I just kind of wish they hadn't gone quite so far with the fan service in the second half. I think if we could have spent more time as Grace having to deal with Victor, then we would have had an all-timer villain of the series. To that point, Victor is my biggest disappointment in this game. He had so much potential to be such a creepy, scary villain, but he ends up not doing much for most of the story and gets replaced by Zeno for most of the second half. I also would have liked to see more of the weird T-virus mutants like the girl and the fat guys. I think they could have done some really creepy stuff with those designs, but instead we just end up fighting a lot of previous villains in a row. Now with that being said, as a Resident Evil fan, the fan service worked on me. I loved it on my first playthrough and I still do love it. I just think they might have gone a little too far. Specifically, the plant was kind of stupid, and Victor being a nemesis was really boring to me. Also, don't forget the whole Zeno gaslight. That's probably the worst part of the story for me. But to end on a positive note, I think Grace is one of the best new protagonists they've introduced. Let me compare here. I think she's better than Ethan, and definitely better than Moira Burton, although she does have a cool arc, and certainly better than all the newbies in RE6. All in all, I think this game fucks really hard. Like I said, the first half is literally perfect in my eyes. Thank you all so much for watching.